cooking on Shabbat, laws of food preparation before Shabbat, what do you have to do in order to make sure that you won't come to stoke the coals on Shabbat? The rabbis are very concerned. As you know, one of the jobs of the rabbis is to create fences to protect the Torah. That's the job of the rabbis, among other things, right? Because if you don't have a fence, then people, when they get too close, they could come to violate the Torah. And Hashem says to the rabbis, your job is to protect the Torah. And anytime the rabbis feel it's necessary to make a fence, to build a fence out of protection, sometimes people need that extra fence. and now the Mishnah is discussing, we're going to see about, there are different things that cook things. You could heat, there's fire that cooks things. There's something called a tolda, the or, which is the derivative of fire, meaning there's the fire itself, a pot being directly on a fire. Then there's a pot being on something that was heated up through a fire, meaning second step, not the original, wasn't directly on a fire. Let's say a fire heated something up, and now you go into that thing that the fire heated up. So we're going to see that's also prohibited. You can't go ahead and cook through that method, and we'll see in the Gemara that's even going to be a biblical prohibition. But what about the sun cooking something? Put an egg in the sun, right? Crack an egg in the sun, and the sun, would that be? We're going to see that's not called cooking. And the question will be, what about rabbinically? Would the rabbis make any fence? So it's not necessary to make a fence, because we'll see that people won't make a mistake. So now comes the Mishnah on 38b4, discusses a following case. Ein notnin beitza b'sad ha'mecham b'shvil shetetgalgel. You can't place an egg next to a kettle, right? You're going to put it adjacent to a kettle. Let's say you have this tea kettle, and this tea kettle, it's a hot tea kettle, and the hot tea kettle was heated up through fire, right? That's how the hot tea kettle got fire. But you're not putting the egg on the fire. You're putting the egg on the side of this kettle. Now, if it's going to, and the point is, you're placing this egg, morning, Adam, you're placing this egg there, you want the egg to roll. What does it mean that you roll? You want it?
No, 7:30, 8 o'clock. 7:30, upstairs. Sorry.
Well, no problem. Morning. You can't, morning, Adam. We just started the Mishnah 38b4. So it says you can't place an egg next to a kettle. You want to roast the egg, that it should reach a level that it should be able to roll. An egg, when it's raw, it's not able to roll. It doesn't have that rolling abilities. But once you go ahead and you roast it a certain amount, then it has the ability to roll. And that we're going to see after it begins, the egg starts becoming hard, right? The egg, if you crack open a raw egg, it's all liquid, right? But once you go ahead and you heat it up next to this tea kettle, the more it starts cooking, the more it's going to get hotter through this cooking or roasting. And once it's able to roll very easily, so then you know that the egg was cooked. That's called cooking. And the Mishnah talks about the rolling, because when you put the egg on the side of a hot kettle, it's not going to reach a high level of cooking. It's only on the side of a hot kettle. And because the walls of the kettle are not hot enough to really give it a perfect cooking.
How's the kettle hot?
Right. So let's say you just took the kettle right off you took it off the fire. Let's say you took it off right before Shabbat and it's still boiling. Or let's say even if, we said even if it was on Shabbat itself, in item, we spoke about keeping a food on a fire on Shabbat. We said there's a concern that you might come to stoke the fire, right? That's why you will not be able to leave a food directly on a fire. But let's say water is a type, if the water is completely cooked, and the more it cooks, it's just evaporating more. So there's not a concern that you're going to go ahead and stoke that fire to make the fire larger. So therefore, technically, a kettle should be something that you could have leave directly on a fire before Shabbat, as long as it's let's say, according to, if you want to fulfill all the opinions, as long as it's fully cooked, that the water reached full level of cooking, of boiling, and since it's not improving the more it's cooking, you would be able, David, technically to leave that on the fire, and therefore on Shabbat, if you take it off the fire, then, or what about, David? What about if it's on the fire and then you just put the egg next to the wall of that kettle? So the Mishnah is telling us that would be a problem. That this minimal amount of roasting that's happening with this egg, because like we said, against the wall of that tea kettle, it's not going to reach such high level of full complete roasting. But that's called enough of a level of cooking, of roasting, that you would be in violation of Shabbat, of cooking on Shabbat, because that reaches a level of edibility normal edibility as a result of that, and that would be the problem. That's poached egg. It's very set.
Runny, but,
Okay, so that's now. So they bring up your point, David, that the Mish is teaching us you can't roast an egg with the walls of this kettle, even after you remove this kettle from the fire. Not just that the kettle is on the fire and you put the egg next to it, and because something that's cooked with a derivative of a fire is like being cooked with the fire itself. And therefore the kettle, which received its heat from the fire, and now you are putting something against that kettle that received the heat from the fire, that is in violation of cooking. The Mishnah continues. Lo yafkiena, if you want Adam to send to the group. Lo yafkiena bisudorim. Don't break the egg over clothing that was heated up with the sun. So you have clothing, a scarf, or a sudar, or whatever it might be, and it was heated up with the sun. So now, it's not only it's not the fire itself. Not only it's not a derivative of fire, it's a derivative of the sun. Good morning, Ralph. Good morning, Morris.
Rabbi.
Morris, I was thinking about you. Thinking about you also, Ralph, but I was thinking about Morris. I missed him at the class.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, you're on my mind. So the Mishnah is now teaching us about the prohibition of cooking is not limited. Morning, Simon. The prohibition of cooking is not limited to cooking with a fire. It's cooking with something that was heated up from a fire. And that's what the Mishnah now says, that a tea kettle that was heated up from fire, not only I can't cook the water in the pot on Shabbat, I can't take an egg and put it against the wall of a pot of the tea kettle that was heated up through the fire, right? But yet, and now the question is, can I take a garment, a scarf that was heated up, a turban that was out in the sun, and now the sun heated up that turban, that clothing, it got really hot. Middle East heat. And now I want to take an egg on Shabbat and I want to go ahead and crack the egg on that Sudah. Would I be able to crack the egg on top of that garment? The garment was heated up. How was the garment heated up? The garment was heated up through the what? Through the sun. Now, what I would think, you see, I think in general, we can look, I just want to bring up an issue which we have to look into, that eggs, raw eggs are mukser on Shabbat. When Shabbat comes, I think you can't move a raw egg because it's not something you eat. It has no real use for yourself on Shabbat. But I'm wondering that maybe perhaps I wonder if you have in mind before Shabbat that you're going to be using these eggs for eating, would that remove the issue of mukseh on the eggs? That's what we have to think about, because the issue the Gemara is Mishnah talking about, can I take a raw egg and crack it open on a sudah? But what do you mean the egg should be mukseh? Raw egg should be mukseh.
Why? Because you can't crack it open?
Not because you can't crack it, because that's not what people use. People don't eat raw eggs. So meaning a food that people don't use, it's not edible type of thing. Maybe there's a chazan. They say that the people who are cantors, they have raw eggs, right, for their throat. But meaning they don't. They who eats raw eggs? What use you have for a raw egg on Shabbat? What kind of use it is? You have any use for a raw egg on Shabbat?
A lot of people used to eat them. They used to give them to their kids every morning.
Raw eggs, yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, Rocky.
Right. Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
No, I'm telling you, in Israel.
Okay, I'm bringing up the point, which maybe needs a little bit more research. I'll try to research today a little bit about eggs and mukseh. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, Simon? There's eggs, but the Mishnah seems to have there's no issue of the mukseh. The Mishnah is not concerned with the issue of mukseh, which we have to see if anybody discusses. But the Mishnah is saying here, the first opinion says you can't crack a raw egg on a garment that was heated up from the sun. Meaning you want this egg to cook. And how are you cooking this egg? By cracking it open on a hot garment. And the heat of the garment is going to cook the egg. So is that a problem or not? So this opinion says, the first opinion says it's a problem. It's a problem. Now, because Rabbi Yossi Matir. Rabbi Yossi says you could do it. Rabbi Yossi says you could go ahead and crack open the egg on Shabbat on top of this garment, and it's going to cook from that. Now, why? Because everybody agrees that something that's heated up from the sun is not the prohibition of cooking on Shabbat on a Torah level is something that was heated up from fire or a derivative of fire. But if it's heated up from the sun or a derivative of the sun, that type of fuel is not that heating source is not prohibited on a Torah level. The question here is, did the rabbis create a fence by a derivative of a sun? Because if you're going to allow the derivative of the sun, maybe they'll come to allow a derivative of fire, right? So we're going to see here, do we make a fence? That's going to be the issue. So here we have actually an argument in the Mishnah that the Tanakama, the first opinion of the Mishnah, holds that we have to make a gzeirah, we have to make a fence, we have to say a derivative of the sun, meaning not that it was cooked in the sun itself, not that you put the egg in the sun to cook the egg, you open the egg and the sun is going to cook it. That's not the case of the Mishnah. The case of the Mishnah is you crack open an egg on a garment, David, that was heated from the sun. So that's the question. Do we make a fence? So the first opinion says we make a fence. And however, And the Gemara is going to explain it more later on. Rabbi Yossi Makir. Rabbi Yossi says there's no problem. You could do it. Now, then the Mishnah continues. Lo yatminena b'chol u'ba'avak drachim. You can't go ahead and take the egg and you want to take the egg and wrap it in the sand. Insulate the egg in sand. Sand got hot from the sun. So we're making a distinction between a garment that got hot from the sun and a case of cracking an egg onto a garment, right? Cracking it open on top of a garment. And now we're talking about not on top, we're talking about placing the egg, wrapping the egg on all sides in sand or in avak drachim or in the dirt on the road, the dirt that got hot from the sun, b'shvil shetitzle, in order that it should go ahead and roast. You want that egg to go ahead and roast.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
Why would you even go there? Who is frying egg on the garment? I mean, are they relating it to it's going to be a frying pan or something? Or, I mean, on the sand. Who put the egg in the sand? Why they even go?
Right. Okay. Very good. Good, Simon. Excellent. So here we are. We're in the Middle East. We might be living in a tent. We might be living.
Even the dog doesn't eat the egg with sand. So why would the human?
Very good. Very good. Again. We're talking about the egg. Egg with the sand. The egg has a shell on. Right. The egg is in its shell. Therefore, it's not nothing. It's not. We're not mixing. We're not mixing the inside, the contents of the egg, with the sand. The person says, you know what? I'm hungry. It's Shabbat. I have eggs, but I need a creative way to how could I eat this egg? Because I can't cook it. It's Shabbat. I can't go ahead and make a fire and cook. I know I can't make a fire and cook this egg, Simon. I want a Sudash Lishit, right? Exactly. I want to have a nice Sudash Lishit. I know the Gemara says that it's a tremendous reward, special to honor the Shabbat with 3 meals, Sudash Lishit. And it's a long Shabbat afternoon. I'm hungry. I want an egg. Well, you know what? Your child wants an egg. You want to give an egg to your child. And now, so what do? I can't cook it. So like you said.
Wait till the Shabbat over, and I'm going to make you a super omelet.
But but Shabbat is over. The kids going to sleep already. Shabbat is over at 8:30, Simon. You know what I mean? We're talking about in the summer months. So the Siyum Maris. So therefore, I like you said, I need to be creative. And you know what? His wife forgot to put up the eggs, and she wants to have, and she knows the husband loves eggs. So you can't. So now she's trying to be creative. How do I get the eggs ready? You got to get some eggs, and now she said, I know I can't cook the egg, but can I go ahead and heat it up to, if I wrap it in the sand, would that be allowed? Now, even though the same question I asked before, sand in generally will also be mukseh. But on Shabbat, can I go ahead and put my hand in the sand? It should also be something that's mukseh. We have to see about that as well. But the Mishnah is not discussing that concern. The Mishnah, for some reason, there's not the issue of mukseh. Maybe if you prepared the sand before Shabbat, maybe in a case that you were camping out somewhere, and let's say you prepared the sand, and therefore, just like maybe sand, if the child would play with sand on Shabbat, you have maybe like what they call like a sandbox, right? That means that has a purpose, which playing purposes, right? So therefore, it's not just no purpose, right? If on Shabbat I want to go ahead, I'm walking the street, I want to handle the dirt. That's a fine. That should be mukseh. But here, let's say it was designated for use, but I can't take the egg, Morris, and wrap it and insulate it in the sand. Now the question is, and everybody agrees I can't do that. Even though we said a moment before, when it comes to cracking an egg onto a garment that was heated from the sun, we have a dispute whether I could do that or not. One opinion says I'm allowed to go ahead and crack an egg open onto a garment, but yet everybody agrees in this case, I can't wrap the egg in the sand, even though what's the difference? The sand, where did the sand get its heat from? The sun. Where did the garment get the heat from? The sun. Yet when it comes, it's a derivative, both cases, it's a derivative of the sun. But one case you told me, well, there's an argument whether I could do it or not. Crack the egg open onto the garment. But in this case, you're telling me when it comes to the sand, everybody agrees I can't do it. Why? The sand is also heated from the sun. So we're going to see that there's something else going on. The case is different. This is unique because here it's insulated in the sand. It's totally wrapped. And we're going to see that when you're dealing with insulating stuff, how that makes a difference. So that's what the Gemara says at this point. Now, the Gemara brings an interesting story. Ma'aser, there was a story. She'asu anshe Tiberia. The people of Tiberia, everybody has seen the hot springs in Tiberia and Tiberias, right? The hot springs. I remember when I was in Israel, when I went to Tiberia once, and the hot springs, it's fascinating. You put your hand in, the water is hot. And it's not, that water is not didn't have a beautiful smell, by what I recall. Therefore, that's going to play a role over here. But Ma'aser she'ansa anshe Tiberia, heviu silon shel tzinor, so named. They brought like a pipe of cold water, l'toch ama shel chamin. They put it through. Let's say you had, a ditch where there was the waters of Tiberia, the springs of Tiberia were going through. It was water from Tiberia, so it's hot, naturally hot, these springs. And I want to go ahead and heat up cold water. I'm not using the Tiberia water because it's not so edible. So I take a pipe, I run it through, and I want to use the Tiberia water as the heating system. And Tiberia water, let's say we're going to be learning now. We're going to explain it that it's not heated up from fire, right? And I go ahead and I take this pipe and I set it up. Now we're going to explain the Mishnah. There's different understandings of what exactly the case is. We're going to take one way some of the Rishonim explain that I take the pipe before Shabbat. I set up the pipe before Shabbat. I set it up Friday afternoon, and the water runs through this pipe. It goes, and the pipe is through the springs of the hot springs. And when the water runs through the pipe, it gets heated up because the pipe and the water is submerged in the hot spring. Okay, David, you got the case? Okay. So the people of Tiberia, they thought there's no problem of doing this because they set up the system before the Shabbat, and it's just going, and it's going by itself. The system is just the water is flowing through. So because they wanted that the water that's cold, that's coming through, could be heated up from the heat of this of the hot water from the springs of Tiberia. We are on 38b4 in the Mishnah. That was their intention. Now, we're explaining the way Tosfot. This is Tosfot's position. The people of Tiberia did not wash themselves in the water from the fountains, from the hot springs of Tiberia, because it's a bad smell. But they would take this cold water, clean cold water, and they would go ahead and they would heat up by going through this spring. Now, So now, so the Mishnah says, Omru lahem chachamim. The chachamim said to the people of Tiberia, Im b'Shabbat, if the cold water entered on Shabbat into this hot spring, kechamim shehuchmu b'Shabbat, we're gonna treat it as if it's water that was actually heated on Shabbat. If a person actually heated water on Shabbat, you can't benefit. You can't use that water that was heated on Shabbat itself. But surim b'rechitza u'b'shetiyah, and something that you not be able to. You can't wash your hands with it. You can't drink it because you're not allowed to use on Shabbat something that was cooked in a prohibited way, whether it was cooked through, whether it was, whether you want to eat it, you want to drink it, you want to wash your hands with it, you can't benefit from it. So even though the people of, we saw in halacha that, in Shulchan Aruch, the Sephardi opinion is if someone cooked on Shabbat, even unintentionally, they cooked something unintentionally, nobody could benefit from it on the Shabbat. Good morning. No one could benefit on Shabbat. I can't eat or drink that food that was cooked on Shabbat unintentionally.
This was heated before Shabbat.
And this is very good. And this was heated before, meaning the springs are heated from it's always heated. And I didn't put the water in on the I didn't put the water in on Shabbat. I set it up that the water is flowing from before Shabbat. Morning, Stephen. So I set it up the water is flowing before Shabbat, but yet we're going to treat it as if I did it on the Shabbat itself, and therefore I won't be able to use it. Now, and similarly, the Mishnah states, the im b'Yom Tov, if the water came, if I set it up before Yom Tov, now Yom Tov, I'm allowed to go ahead and cook on Yom Tov, right? But and here the Mishnah says, if the water came in on the Yom Tov, then we treated the water that was heated, the hot cold water that came in through these pipes on Yom Tov, we're going to treat it kechamin shehuchmu b'Yom Tov, like water that was heated up on Yom Tov. And water that was heated up on Yom Tov, so you should say it shouldn't be any problem. And yet the Mishnah states there's an issue. V'asurin b'rechitza umutarin b'shtiyah. So what's the law with water that was heated up on Yom Tov? So you could drink water, but you could take a pot of cold water on Yom Tov, and you could put it on the fire. Right? You made the fire before Yom Tov. You could cook on Yom Tov. We cook on Yom Tov, right? But the Mishnah is saying you could use it for food purposes, but you can't use it for washing purposes. And we're going to see, what does this mean? What is this referring to regarding washing purposes? So on Yom Tov, as we said, you could cook food on Yom Tov to eat on that day. Can't cook on Yom Tov for the purpose of eating it after Yom Tov. You have to cook on Yom Tov for today, for the Yom Tov itself. We don't cook from one day of Yom Tov for another day of Yom Tov, right? That now. So therefore, you definitely could drink the water that was heated up. But the prohibition to bathe your whole body, but you're not allowed to wash your whole body with water that was heated up on Yom Tov. You got that? You can't. Let's say we want to wash your whole body with water that was heated up on Yom Tov. That is not allowed. You want to wash your hands, your face, that you could, but you want to wash your whole body, you're not allowed. And the rabbis told the people of Tiberia, not only you can't take water that was heated up directly, you put on a fire on Yom Tov. You can't use that water to bathe in, to wash your whole body. Even water that was set up to be heated up, and you didn't heat it up on Yom Tov, you set up the pipes before Yom Tov, that also would be a problem. Okay, so that's Mishnah, very fascinating Mishnah. Okay. Iboyolo. Now the Gemara is now focusing in analyzing the Mishnah. Igigel Mai. What is the law? Good morning, Stephen. You're coming at a very good point. Every point's a good point to come in. Wherever you come in to learn, any place you come in to learn is a good point, right? You think the rabbi would ever say it's not a good point? You think I would ever say it's not a good point? No such thing. How do you like that? So how do you like that moment? No such thing. You come in, a person comes a second before the class is over. A second before you heard a word of Torah, that's a good point. Of course, he came more than that. Every moment counts. So the question is, this idea, the Mishnah says that if you put a egg on Shabbat, a raw egg against the wall of a hot pot, a pot that you had was heated up, and you put the egg against the wall of that hot pot until it roasts a little bit, that the egg roasts a little bit, now becomes edible in a very it's very rawest, bare state, as you call like what you call a pouched egg? What do you call it? Poached egg, whatever it's called. You if that's called cooking. The Mishnah says it's a problem. Morning. The Mishnah says you can't do it. But the question is, okay, if you did it, is it a biblical violation? Some understand the Gemara's question. Is it a biblical violation or rabbinic violation? Meaning to say, morning, when you cook with fire, directly on a fire, that's a prohibition of Shabbat, of cooking. What about you didn't put something on the fire, you didn't put a pot on the fire, you put something on a derivative of a fire. The fire heated up the pot, and now your source of heat was from the derivative, from the pot. The pot is doing the cooking, not the fire is doing the cooking. But the pot received its heat from the fire. That's called toldo, the child of fire. There's fire, that's called or aish, and it's called the tolda. The tolda is like the child, the derivative of fire. Is the derivative of fire have the same halachic status of a fire itself? That would incur, let's say, if a person violates the Shabbat unintentionally, right? I didn't know I couldn't do that. I thought I could do that, and I did it. So there's something called the karma chatat, a sin offering. If a guy goes ahead and he thinks he's allowed to boil water on Shabbat, that's what he thinks. He didn't know I can't boil water on Shabbat. He thought I want to have a nice tea, I want to have a coffee. He thought I could boil the water on Shabbat. And then the rabbi tells him, you couldn't, you were not allowed to do that. You cooked on Shabbat. Rabbi, but the fire was on before Shabbat. The fire was on, but the water wasn't cooked. You took water, raw water, and you cooked it on Shabbat. So now he has to bring a sin offering, right? He's not going to get stoned for it. We're not going to kill him for it because he wasn't warned. It was unintentional. But not knowing it, a lot of people think in life, better I don't know. I don't want to know. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. I don't know why that I can't do it. But they're very wrong, because if you don't know, it's also a sin. It's called an unintentional sin, right? We got to be educated. We have to know. If we don't learn, then there'll be many charbonot chatat we have to bring when the Beit HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt. Who knows how many sin offerings you are going to bring for all those things that they don't know the laws of Shabbat. So now the question is, the same way you bring a chatat, a sin offering, because the only time you have to bring a sin offering, a chatat, when there's a biblical violation. So what is this violation of heating up the egg by using the heat of the source of the pot, the hot pot, by heating up the egg with that? Is that a biblical violation or a rabbinic violation? That is how some explain the Gemara's question. What is the law if he went ahead and reached this level of cooking through the heat of the pot? That is one way to explain the Gemara. Others explain the Gemara, since we said it's a minimal amount of cooking, because how much cooking could you get? How much roasting do you get when you put an egg against the wall of a kettle, a hot kettle? It's a minimum level of cooking. is that level amount of cooking enough to reach the level that you say it's cooked, and you've reached the level of violating the Shabbat of cooking, or it's still an insignificant amount that it's not called that you really reach the level of cooking. You hear the question, Steve? That is a question of the Gemara. That has how a minimal amount of roasting that and what was the amount of roasting the Mishnah said? How what it reached a level that it enables the egg to easily roll. Now that you can roll the egg, because the egg is just very liquidy, but once it starts cooking, once it starts roasting, it becomes a little harder and it's easier to roll. So that level of rolling, if you reach that level, is that called cooking? Did you reach the point of cooking that would be a Torah violation of cooking? So Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says, Gilgel, the roasting of the egg, that minimal roasting of egg, that it roasted enough to reach the level of rolling, chayev chatat. Then he violated the sin offering. Meaning, what if a guy goes ahead, takes a tea water, cold water, fills up a tea kettle on Shabbat, and he puts it on an existing fire? When would he be in violation of cooking on Shabbat? If he put it on and a moment later he takes it off, he didn't do the violation of cooking, right? He did something very wrong, because you can't take a pot of cold water, put it on a fire on Shabbat, because it might cook. But did he do the cook? But if he put it on for a second, and then he remembered the Shabbat and he took it off a second later, did he violate the biblical prohibition of cooking? No, because he didn't cook. If you caught yourself, a guy catches himself, he could totally fix what he did wrong before it's too late, right? Once you turn on a fire, you made the fire. So therefore, you do it. The total violation of making a fire was created. You did that. It's over. The fire, you did it. I'm not telling you to don't close the fire now. You open the fire. It's like a guy opens a light on Shabbat. Some people, they open the light on Shabbat, then they close it. Can't do that. If you by mistake open the light on Shabbat, what do? You leave the light open, right? So the guy went ahead and he made a mistake and he lit the fire, leave the fire. You made a mistake, you forgot. You turned on the fire, but that's it. But if you put on a pot of raw water on the fire on Shabbat, right? The fire was on. You put a pot of, or you turned on the fire. That was problem one you did. Now I filled up a tea kettle with cold water and I put that tea kettle on the fire. That was a terrible thing I did. But the violation of cooking is only going to happen when it actually what? Cooks. So there I should remove it immediately. So it never was cooked. I didn't reach the level of cooking. Is that clear, everybody? So now the Gemara, but if you reach the level of rolling that the egg will already roll, so the Gemara said that already is called already cooked. You already violated the prohibition of cooking. You did it unintentionally, so you have to bring a karma chatat. You have to bring a sin offering. So he says, Gilgal Mai, Rav Yosef, Gilgel Chayav Chatat. If you went ahead and it reached the level of rolling, so it's Chayav Chatat, it's Chayav a sin offering. And according to both explanations, it means either that's called enough cooking, as long as it wants to reach the level of rolling, but if it didn't reach the level of rolling, it's not enough cooking. Talking about rolling, we got some good rolling going on over here. And then according to the other explanation, that it's referring to being heated up not directly from fire, but from a derivative of fire, right? You're being heated up from the heat of the pot, which was heated up from a fire. And the Gemara is teaching us that has the same status as fire itself. A derivative of fire is just like fire. And because it's just like fire, have a good day, Sally. Therefore, it's just like fire itself. Therefore, it's a biblical prohibition and carry the chatat, the sin offering. I want to wish everyone, thank you all for joining. Every person that comes, every minute counts. Not only every minute counts, every second counts. Have a great day, everybody. And a special welcome to Yehuda from the Holy Land. We always love to see him. You bring extra energy to the class. Every person, by the way, I hold, the more people, Morris, the better the class. Because I hold, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And you see, and you brought him. You see, everyone brings each other. Because every holy neshama that walks into the class. And we got on the screen, we got Asaf and we got Ralph. Have a great day, everybody. Look at that smile. He learns, look at that smile, look at that happiness. Have a great day.
You too, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.